Often when you walk into a room for an interview, and it's a law firm, there'll be, if you imagine this, there'll be 3 partners or 4 partners, or in some cases 6, or even just 1 if you're lucky. You'll be sat there in a sort of semicircle, and you'll be sat at a table. If they were a nice firm, or a normal firm who don't engage in psychological tricks, your chair will be there, okay? But some firms have worked out that they can be quite evil, and they will put the chair, say the partners are there, they'll put your chair there. So you walk in and you go, hello, how do you do? And they go, take a seat, because they want to see what you do with your chair. Do you try and climb into it and sort of sit like that, and then get your legs around and, oh yeah, okay, I'm ready, and sit there with the partners there? Or do you pick up your chair and move it round to here and say, do you mind if I just move the chair, thank you very much, and sit there? And this does happen, honestly, and people will be so nervous, they will actually climb onto the chair and sit with it there the whole time that they're there, or until the partner says you can move your chair. The other one they do is, the partner, sorry, this is probably all slightly weird, but there we go. I've been for an interview with a law firm when I was a trainee, or going for a training contract. Massive boardroom, probably 30 foot, huge place, chairs all down that side, probably 25 chairs, all the way around the room, tables like this, probably 8 of them, 4 of them or 6 of them all together. Partner sat here, and she had the chair here for me. And I sat there, I thought, I can't move it, because if I move it, it will look like I'm shying away from her. And we had an hour interview with the partner sat there, and me sat there, sort of, like that, going like that. And the whole purpose of that, I think, was to try and see how I'd react, or try and see how the potential trainee would react to someone being so close to their space. So just be prepared for psychological tricks.
Just a quick question with my last interview, it was in a boardroom, there was about 10 chairs around a big table.
Oh yes.
And he led me into the room, there was just one partner interviewed me, he led me into the room on my own. Well, I went in front of him, and just said, take a seat. I panicked, and I went on a merry dance around the room and ended up at a table, the chair at the far side. I mean, what's the best plan? Do you sit in the middle of the table? I mean, I'm guessing you don't sit at the end, the head of the table.
First thing to say is that is another trick, because if they go and take a seat, they try and see where you sit. And there are psychological theories relating to this. If you sit at the head of the table there, that means you're the boss. If you sit down that end, it means you're a complete wimp, because you're worried about the other guy sat up there, so you're sort of sat in the corner and cowering away. There's no right or wrong answer. There's a way of dealing with it, which is to say, after you, to the partner, if he lets you do that, or she lets you do that. If she doesn't, probably best to go for about halfway, because then you're sort of on the fence, so to speak.
Try to have you got a preference where to sit, and again, he just kind of shirked that responsibility and just left it to me, so
right.
I panicked a little.
So presumably he was either subconsciously thinking about where you'd sit, or he was just not being very pleasant to you.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It was quite pleasant. You know, spent an hour and a half chatting mainly about football. So I mean,
right.
I don't know.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
Never bring up the chair test.
Sorry?
Never bring up the chair test.
Don't bring up the chair test.
Can you say, have I passed the chair test?
Oh, right. They'll probably look at you as if you're completely insane, because they probably don't even know they're doing it themselves, but so many seem to do it. Right, the other thing, when you walk into the room, you often come in, you bang on the door, and then you walk in, and there's 4 partners sat there. You need to shake hands with every single one of them, regardless of who they are, how scary they look, how nervous you are, whether you fall over between there or here. You must shake hands with them all to say, hello, I'm Jonathan Fagan, pleased to meet you, pleased to meet you, pleased to meet you. Unless, and it does sometimes happen, that one of the partners, if they've got 20 trainees and they know they're going to get 80 handshakes, because you shake hands and shake hands again, one of the partners will actually get up and sort of meet you halfway and go, hello, pleased to meet you, do you want to take a chair there? And then they stop you from getting past almost and shaking hands with the others. What do you think the next thing you do is, after you've sat down? That's presuming they said take a seat, because if they don't say take a seat, don't sit down, or say, shall I sit here? Okay, don't just sit down, because they may be waiting for you to see what you do. Okay, so what's the next thing? After you've walked into me, shaking hands, they've said take a seat, what next? Any thoughts?
Introduce yourself.
Sorry?
I was going to say introduce yourself.
Well, you've done that, and they know who you are because you shook all the hands and they know on the list, next person, oh yeah, it's number 8.
I tend to check if they've got my CV, up-to-date CV.
Okay, excellent. Anything else?
Thank you for seeing me.
Sorry?
Thank you for seeing me.
Yes,
Brave beyond.
you could do that, yeah. First thing I do is ask for water if it's not there. If it is there, say, can I just pour myself one at the start of the interview? And that is extremely important. Again, you probably sat there thinking, oh, this is all nonsense, the chairs, drinking water. If you have water on the table, this is partly why we bought water, and why we're hoping for tables, but there you go. If you've got water on the table, you just want to pour yourself one. Try and keep your hands steady. Some people's hands shake, my hands shake like mad when I'm for interviews. If you pour yourself a water, the key to it is not because you want some water. If you get asked an awkward interview question, it gives you 5 seconds because you can say I could say it. That's a good question, and you actually sip some water, and in the time you're doing that, your brain's got time to think. Usually the brain will just think, I really don't have a clue what to say, but I'll just sip some water and pretend to do. But if you've got the water there, it just gives you that pausing time before you need to respond. If you don't do it at the start, it's very awkward, because if you do it halfway through an interview, then you've almost got to interrupt the chain of thought. Often, if it's a good firm, they'll ask you at the start if you want a cup of tea or coffee or water or something, but they don't always, but it is worth doing. Okay, so you've started the interview, so they're going to ask you some questions. Just in relation to how you sit, there's a lot of psychology to do with this. If you sit and you're talking and you're doing this with your hands and you're pointing up and you're not doing talking around the room, that looks very bad just from a psychological perspective, because it means that you're nervous. I mean, quite a lot of people use their hands to speak. I do it all the time. But in an interview environment, it can be taken as a sign of nerves. So it's very important to keep your hands still whilst you're being interviewed. The best way of doing that is to actually either put them in a clasp or cross them or anything, keep them together in your lap. Some people, if you go for interviews, you'll sit in board chairs and they have big, wide arms on it, and you'll find yourself sort of on both sides if you try and do that, or leaning to one side and not the other. Whereas if you just keep them still, it's much easier to do. If your hands shake, because a lot of people's hands shake, my hands shook when I went for interviews, they shook when I went into court to do cases. It's just the nature. If you're slightly nervous, your hands shake, you've really got to keep them still and try and keep them away from anyone seeing them, because you really don't want them seeing that your hands shake as you're being interviewed, because it is a sign of weakness. Okay, it's interesting because it's another person's perception of your handshake. You may think your handshake is absolutely fine, and then you shake hands with someone else, and they won't normally tell you what they think of your handshake, but some people have a very, very firm handshake without knowing it. And there's a folk I know that will shake your hand and you'll feel like your hand's being crushed, and they don't even know that they're doing it. Now, it gets back to the point about trainee solicitors. If you're going to be a trainee solicitor or a pupil barrister or a legal executive, you're going to be starting at the bottom of the pile. So when you're shaking hands with someone else from a psychological perspective, and they're a partner of a law firm, they're your boss, so you don't want to crush the fingers. You want to give them a nice, firm, but not too firm handshake. Never, ever, ever put your thumb over the top, because that's an indication that of either you're in the Freemasons or it's a sign of great dominance. That means I am the boss. And about 2 years ago, and Channel 4 did a presentation where they actually showed a guy trying to shake hands with Gordon Brown to see how he shook hands. And he actually put his hands on the other person's arm and shakes like that. So he does 2 handshakes. So handshakes are very important. The first 5 minutes you are in that interview room is the 5 minutes when that person will make a decision as to whether they like you or not. It's just such human nature to want to immediately know whether or not you like someone and see how they behave with you. So if you give them a limp handshake, then chances are they're going to remember that as fairly wimpy. So try and give them a firm handshake. But one thing, it's Nick, isn't it? Yeah, you didn't look over. Sorry, what's
Jade.
Jane? Sorry, you didn't look at Jane because you shook her hand. You walked up to her and you were like that, and that's almost a sign of insecurity, lack of confidence. It's taken as that. So you must, when you shake hands, you look at the person you're shaking hands and smile. Don't glare at them, don't do anything else, just smile and say, hello, I'm James Heron or Jonathan Fagan, whatever. Don't squeeze too hard, don't squeeze too soft, but most of you did very well. They were all very good handshakes. One other thing, some people when they shake hands, they do go very close to the person they're shaking hands, so the other person's there, and they'll shake hands by looking at them there. But some other people, like Nick demonstrated, lean out, try and shake hands without getting too close. So it's a sort of medium way, just the normal arm length, shake hands. And again, you probably sat there thinking this is psychological mumbo jumbo, but there's so much comes out of this at the start of an interview in those 5 minutes. It's very important.